remember to buy a copy of your favorite books from the Cheeky Merchants. If we don't have it, we'll source it for you, but we'll definitely find the book for you.
Hello, Cheeky Natives, and welcome to another episode of the Cheeky Natives. Letokonolo and I are on a roll this year. I think I've said this almost like every single podcast, but that's just because we really have been on a roll, and you guys can thank me later. But I'm really excited for today's conversation. Before I absolutely just lose track, Letokonolo, how you doing, boo? Girls with Merc?
I'm doing well. I was telling you that in preparation for our conversation today, I was just laughing again at just like how absolutely wonderful this book is, right? So I'm really excited. And like you say, I think that really this year this is the year. 7 is the year of completion, and it feels like as we've entered this year, we've just been every episode in 2024. Ha! Fire.
So I have the extreme pleasure, as always, of introducing today's guest. And gosh, this book is like funny, heartbreaking, inserts all the adjectives. So I'm excited to introduce today's guest. Her name is Damilare Kuku. She has worked as a radio presenter, a script writer, film producer, actor, and director. And she is the author of Nearly All the Men in Lagos Are Mad, which is her first book. So this is her debut. And we're really excited to welcome you to the Cheeky Natives. Welcome, Damilare.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. Very excited.
I know this is not the book we're talking about right now, but you've just also published your first novel. And I wanted to speak a little about that, how exciting. And I saw that it was sold out in Nigeria and Ghana in the first day that it was available. And that was quite exciting. So I wanted to find out, now that your second baby is out in the world, but your first novel, how are you feeling about your first novel being out in the world?
I feel good. I'm very grateful to God and to the people who made this possible. To be clear, it's also out in South Africa. I don't know how we haven't sold out in South Africa. So I'm coming to South Africa to take over that market. I've told my publishers that they should not worry. I'm coming there to take over that market. So just a warning. But I feel really good. It was such a shock. To be honest, I knew it was going to do well, but I didn't think it was going to do that well, to sell out in a day. It sold out in a couple of hours. In Nigeria, sold out in a couple of hours when it got... Okay, so the one that shocked me the most was the Ghana, because I thought, okay, Ghana, fine. They're very supportive. Perhaps they'll buy it in a week. They'll be sold. I sold out in a day, and... So it's been very surreal. I guess what it is, I'm very grateful to everyone who supports me, because this is a journey I never thought I would be on. So I'm just riding with the wave as it's going. But yeah, I'm very excited. Only Big Mumbo Matters tomorrow is out. And yeah, I'm coming to South Africa to get that sold out check as well.
Yeah, we're ready. We can't wait. I have so much to say about this book. So I read this book, and then I was like, stop the press, stop whatever you're doing, put down whatever book you're reading, because you need to read this book. And I guess as we get into it, the first question for me is really around the use of humor, right? I'm particularly interested in humor because I think that humor is not this innocuous thing, right? So humor is not you make people laugh, and humor is very particularly directed. It also speaks to social norms, it speaks to social critiques and the like, right? And you use humor in a very interesting way in this book, because you have this medium that is already quite, it's called short stories, or it's called genre, but you take humor and you use it as a tool to almost disarm the reader before you delve into very complex and very serious topics. Some of the themes in this book are infertility, infidelity, sexual abuse as well. So I want to talk about the complexity of using something like humor to delve into these very deep and complicated themes, and why you chose to do that for your short story collection.
Interestingly, I just had an interview not too long ago about this. I do think that the best way to tell a heavy story is with laughter. I just think it's easier. We can't all be like, oh, so he broke up with you. What happened? Then you start to cry. No, you have to laugh at the pain. It's oh my God, he broke up with me. And then, no, it's like, okay, so he left me hanging. He ghosted me. Can you imagine? I was putting on my best dress and he left me hanging. Then you laugh about it because it is sad. But over time, as the wound heals, you start to find humor in it. So what I try to do with my work is to list the humor in the heaviness of life, because what else are we going to do? It's already so serious. Everything in the world there's so much going on that is so serious. So if you can pick up a piece of book or a piece of literature or fiction and just say, okay, let me see what can make me laugh here, I hope that would always be my book. So I just think it's easier to laugh when things are heavy. I also feel it's part of the coping mechanism, because these things that happen to us as human beings are surreal. You know, people, when you look at the stories with Cock Up now, that she had slept with someone, I don't know if that's going to give a lot away, but she slept with a man that her husband asked her to sleep with. And then all of a sudden, he wasn't interested in her anymore. He suggested the madness and then decided he was going to be against it. Isn't that funny? It might not be half funny, but it's like, do you know how crazy you have to be to egg someone on and then after all be like, oh, you are on your own? So yeah, humor is easier when it comes to tragedy. Anyway, so that's it.
I like the fact that you talk about this idea of humor as a coping mechanism. I find that we laugh about really tragic things, right? Like it's something that we've started to laugh about. Haha, but also like after a while you'll be like, oh, I can't believe I did that. Right? The kind of things I feel like I wanted to fight you about is that the collection, the 12 stories have no happy ending or beginning. Like they're just tragic, right? And I wanted to be like, okay, but so this kind of one of the stories feels like it's going to be a happy ending. And then you get to the end, you're like, oh, no. Everybody's so
Let me tell you something.
I wanted to speak about that. Like, why are you not giving us some happiness, whether it's a beginning or an ending?
First of all, I want to apologize to everyone who keeps coming for my ending. Because you're not the only one with I'm being dragged online because of my ending. Guys, I'm doing my best because I'm just talking about what is happening in life. I wish I could write. Okay, so I'll tell you a small story. While we're editing, one of my editors just said, so Dami, just a small request. Can your next book be a love story? Just something that can give us some hope. I'm like, this doesn't give you hope. She's like, it's funny, but it's not particularly hopeful. I think I would work actively with my fourth book to write a much happier ending, because I think the girlies and the guys, they really want happy endings, and I don't want anybody dragging me online anymore. But I just write as is. I don't know how to, but I thought the last story had a happy ending. She confronted the man who did whatever he did to her, and then she chased him. That was good. Do you know what it means to confront the person who harasses you?
Damilare, what do you mean? Did you read the same story?
I wrote it.
What do you mean? Did that feel like a happy ending to you?
I'm doing my best.
Kind of way, right? She essentially got the vindication, but like there wasn't even the beginning. The whole reason why she had to stand up at that cultural event is because there wasn't any happy beginning, right? And while for her own healing and all of that, it's amazing. I was like, nah.
Okay, I'm not even joking. I just turned in my third book, and I wanted to give you guys a happy ending, just so we're clear. I really wanted to, but my agent was like, oh, the former ending I wrote was better. So the fourth book, I'm going to do my best to ensure that. In fact, as I'm writing, I'm going to be like, USA, happy ending, because I don't know what else to do.
Claps once. But I want to talk a little bit about what I feel like is an underlying theme in this book. I think that this book is interesting in the sense that men are a topic, but they're not the center. We've spoken a lot about decentering men, but often that relates to the romantic. And I'm so interested in the idea that you decentered men in this book, in which they play quite a prominent role, right? So men are often the topic of the stories, but they're not the center. And this feels like there's a very feminist statement in writing about men, but not centering them, right? So women's experiences are still at the center of so much of the work that you do here. And I wanted to talk about why you wrote about women's experience of the madmen in Lagos in this particular way.
So I would say that by the time I started to write, because I was working very closely with Chimeka Garrix as I was crafting the stories, what happened was, because I was working with a man, it balanced out the way I told the story. And I'm glad it did that way. I don't know that I'm trying to decenter men intentionally. I just think because I'm a woman, I can only write men as I have come to know them. But then I can be kind enough to listen to a man's. That's why on my team, I always try to get like a male voice. So it's not like all of us are angry women releasing books into the world because say, okay, this one has come again. There's that thing of, oh my God, all your editors are female. That's why you people. No, I try to have a male voice so it doesn't seem like I'm. But then I do think that to be a feminist is no longer, it's a necessity. I think if a particular gender has been disadvantaged for so long, whether it's male or female, the thing you can do as a human being is to help that gender grow. So this has nothing to do with, oh, I'm trying to decenter. It's just there is so much that goes on with being a woman. If you go on Twitter right now, or X, whatever it's called, there's an argument going on right now that men break up with women when they realize they have PCOS or all those hormonal imbalances that we have as women. Whether we like it or not, men have certain privileges that women don't have. We don't have control over our bodies. We don't have control over our hormones. We don't have control over what disease comes into us, as whether Black women or white women or whatever. So when a man says to you, he's breaking up with you because you're constantly sick, something that you're not to blame for, why won't I write for that gender? They deserve some sort of... the risk of signing ironical, because you guys just said now that I don't give happy endings, but I think women deserve some sort of, okay, people see us, we matter, and great for people like me who have been extremely blessed to be at the forefront of African literature now, modern African literature now. Why not write for the gender that I think needs the biggest voice in the room? So I'm not really decentering men. I just write them as I know them.
I love that.
And I think that making the commentary, the talking around illness is particularly interesting, right? Because multiple studies show that when a woman falls ill, so if she has cancer, some other life-threatening illness, her partner is likely to leave her. Her male cis-het partner is likely to leave her. There's this thing about the ways in which women are sort of as to be of service, and what that means for the ways in which the men in our lives then relate to us. So I think it's such an interesting point to think about what it means to be a group of people who are thought of as people who should be in service and servitude, and what happens when you no longer can provide that service.
Yeah, I think it's also sad that when women fall ill, they have to hide it because they don't want you to see them as some sort of, you have to lie to your boyfriend when you have this illness, or your husband, so he doesn't think he's married a sickly person. Meanwhile, it's not your fault. Hormones are hormones. They're going to hormone forever. Yeah, it is what it is.
What I think I really enjoyed, as you'll come to know, I love sex. What I really enjoyed about this collection was kind of women and sexual agency, right? I felt that you wrote these women so beautifully, and the sex that they were having, and their desire to have sex, and the desire to be sexual, in such a liberating way. Because we know that in African society, it is often essentially men who are the holders of sex, and you aren't even a participator as a woman. You just there, right? So they have sex at you and not with you. And I feel in this collection, what you really try to do is give women that agency. And I wanted to speak a little bit about that, particularly in when we think about like African societies where we know that there's some conservativeness around sex, and particularly that women are not sexual beings. But in this book, you bring that to light. I enjoyed the sex scenes, and I know some of them were a little bit steamy. So I was moving around my chair to be like, okay, this feels good. And I wanted to speak a little bit about that, why you made that decision.
We're taking a short break. We're taking a short break.
First of all, I'm going to borrow that line, sex at you and not with you. So if you see it in any of my books, please don't call me out. I've already asked you for permission, and I don't want you to call my publishers out. I already literally said it now. Everybody can hear me say it to you. I'm going to steal that line. Yes, so intentionally, and I know people come for me because even with Bum, I've seen reviews where like, why? What is with the sex scenes? I'm literally trying to tell everyone it's okay for a woman to have sex and enjoy it. I'm not talking about the ones where they are forced or they're molested. I'm talking about the ones where the woman is actively participating in it. What is wrong with enjoying sex? And are we not all having sex? It's such a funny thing to me. In fact, I thought one day I'm going to say it at a reading. When you ask me about it, I'm like, okay, you don't want me to write about sex, then stop having sex. Because everybody talks about sex so freely. Then I put it in my books, and you're going to come for me, Damilare Kuku is back again with it. No, I can't talk about a relationship and not say people, and you will not mention sex, because if you're not even having sex, say for example, you're religious and your religion is restricting your sexual urges, you do realize that in religions, for example, I'm a Christian, right? We're advised to keep ourselves chaste till marriage, which is true. Is that the reality? In most of the time doesn't happen. Now, you and your partner, especially when you're going to get married, have to actively make that decision to stay away from each other, because you know that when you are in rooms together, when a man and a woman are attracted to each other, it's not aeroplane they are going to build, it's not aircraft, it's not taxi that is going to come out from that interaction, it's going to be sex. So I'm a little confused. I don't get it. I'm sorry, I just had to use my Nigerian accent there. But of course, I feel a heavy responsibility now, because I understand that young girls are reading my books. So maybe my fourth book, I will keep the steamy scenes very little. Maybe, I'm not promising, but I do think that if something is happening, and maybe also to teach some of those men how to actually have sex with a woman, not at a woman. Read up these things and be like, okay, so I could do this with my babe and that would be nice. I'm not encouraging this out of the right union, because I don't want people come for me now. They're like, oh, you're a role model. I didn't ask for that title, but okay. I'm just saying that people have sex, and sex is going to continue to be part of the conversation. And let's not be hypocritical about it. Don't come for me when you hear this interview. I literally just said, I understand where we're all coming from. All right.
Also, what you're saying about people having sex is true. Our fertility rates have not dropped substantially. So if people weren't having sex, it would be reflected. So maybe let's all just relax and allow people to just be, right? I've always found that so interesting, how we're so conservative as a continent, as a culture around sex, but our behavior always indicates the opposite, right? It's like a cognitive dissonance.
Exactly.
But I want to talk a little bit about some of the stories, because, sister, let's talk. I want to talk a little bit about in Kakab. Kakab is an important illustration on the power of opening lines. For everyone who may not have their book yet, I'm going to read the opening line and you'll go and buy this book because you want to know what happens. But in Kakab, the story...
Sorry, I had actually asked Darilami to read just a snippet of Kakab, because I just feel like when you enter the book like this, you definitely want to know what's happening.
You actually can't start a story like this, Damilare, because now we all want to know why. So we're going to let you just read the first 2 lines. That's all.
Oh, all right. Cock up. One night, you will calmly put a knife to your husband's penis and promise to cut it off. it will scare him so much that the next day he will call his family members for a meeting in the house.
Okay. I think we can close off the podcast. Go read the book for the rest of that story. But on a serious note, and I think that this is such a telling way to start the story, to start the collection story, I wanted to speak a little bit about two things happen in the story. The first is we see how men's mothers continue to cuddle their sons. There's a reason why he calls his family but doesn't call her family. And the ways in which men's maternal relatives can actually be the biggest gatekeepers of patriarchy. So there's a destruction that families take part in. The second is that you see women reclaim themselves in the face of hard decisions. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how both of those things, the results of patriarchy, but also women having to make some really difficult decisions.
Okay, I want to say something really quickly. I think keeping your family, both sides, out of your marriage is very important. Do you guys watch 90 Days Fiancé or 90 Days Fiancé, the TLC show? Oh my God. Oh, I'm a reality show junkie. I don't have time to write. I don't know how I have time to write. So you need to watch TLC, 90 Days Fiancé, because you will see that both sides of the family need to stay out of a marriage. The marriage is for the husband and the wife. And it goes for both parties. Like both parties, you shouldn't be telling your father what your husband did to you, and you shouldn't be telling your mother what your wife did to you. Everybody needs to let the marriage find its foot. So I think it's both sides. For her, it was the husband's side, but sometimes it might not just be that. So I think marriage should be independent of families. I say they have their parts to play, but I don't think it should be built on that, because people are going to, if you tell your parents what your husband did to you, they're not going to forget it. They're going to remember. So the next time you come back and say, I'm still in love with this man, they're going to be like, okay, he's not the one that did this and that. Just keep your family out of the marriage. Keep your family out of the relationship. So now in Africa, whether we want to admit it or not, it's much more a patriarchal society than for the woman. And so what we find most times is even with the woman's family, they tend to want to support the husband because they want the woman to stay in her husband's house. So women over time have grown to support themselves, expect very little support in marriage. That's why she says she won't need them, because she doesn't expect that even if they come, they might not support her. They might support the husband because everybody believes that you should stay in your husband's house. It's how long ago was it okay for a woman to be a certain age and not married? Before, it used to be you will be looked upon as if you're an outcast or something is wrong with you. Now, when you're not married at a certain age and you're successful, people are not judging you. So I think generally the African society is very patriarchal and it's not the greatest, using very subtle words.
You said that you make such a powerful message in this kind of first story, because I feel like it's also a commentary on patriarchy and how patriarchy protects the laziness of men, right? So you see this poor woman having to toil, having to make sacrifices, and this man is just basically sitting at home. And ultimately, he gets an opportunity to get a work, and she tells him, and he doesn't show up. He sits. She's the one, again, who's having to do the work. And I wanted to speak a little bit about just the importance of stories like this, right? Because, yes, it's funny, but it is exploring really deep things about like patriarchy and how it protects men. But more importantly, it also speaks about the role of powerful men with money. Because ultimately, the decision she is forced to make because of her man is because of the economic situations that they find themselves in. And so I wanted to speak about laziness of men as a protection of patriarchy, but also money and the powerfulness of men as also a function of patriarchy.
Oh, careful. We can't call them lazy now. You have to cater to their ego. Remember? So you can't literally say man is lazy. You just say that things are a bit tough right now and he's doing his best, even though he's literally not. Oh, end of the day. Oh God, I hope people don't come for me with this. I do think that the society walks on eggshells around men that are not, they've not gotten to the stage, or they fail, or they lose their job, and then they're like, oh, because my ego has been affected, I'm no longer going to work, I'm not going to do anything. So you see a situation with Issy where she's, like you said, catering to the entire family, and also ensuring that she keeps his ego in check so that he can still sleep with her at night. So he doesn't feel like, so it's almost like she has to cater for him. And the point of telling this story is to say there is nothing wrong with being, whether it's you as the man or the woman bring the breadwinner in your family. At some point, in a marriage, one person will always earn more than the other. But let's not forget that you're dealing with a human being. So as much as you should cater to your husband's ego, you should also be useful in the house. So it's not, if you don't have a job, but your wife, she goes out and you're the one cooking, taking care of the kids, you're balancing out in a certain way. But God forbid that you say that to a man. And some men are kind enough to take it, because I have met some really amazing men. So I wouldn't say generally all men, but will I say a larger percentage of men tend to always have an issue with doing those things? Yes. So society protects them, and that allows them to be lazy. Because what else? And then with the other, because both men in this story, none of them was particularly nice. Because this other guy could have said to her, you don't need to sleep with me. Let me give you the money just because I'm a nice person. But because he wanted something. Men always want something. Like, why do you have to want something? Why can't you just dash me because you're a good Samaritan and a good person? Why does it have to be because of something else? So again, not all men, please don't come for me, but it's almost like a trade and barter thing. Okay, trade by barter. Give me this and I'll give you that. No. So I feel sorry for her that she did get some pleasure in it at the end of the day, but she lost her home. She nearly, we don't even know how the story ends. As you guys said, so I didn't give her a happy ending. But the truth of the matter is, most times with women in societies that they are earning more, they literally have to die to self. Because if you have a harsh tone with your husband and you're earning more, it's going to be because you're earning more, not because he pissed you off. Not because he said something that annoyed you. It's going to be, because you're earning more. No, it's because you said something annoying. It's not because I'm earning more. It's because what you've said is annoying. And even if I was earning less than you, I would still react in a certain way. As human beings, we should be respectful to one another. We should be respectful with one another. And in a marriage, understand that you're dealing with a human being regardless of the sex. So whether you're earning more, treat everybody with respect. Whether you're earning less, treat everyone with respect. And let's just all do our best in a partnership, whether it's a marriage, a friendship. Nobody wants to be friends with someone that they're always taking and they don't give. And I think that was the case with Issy. And so I think just do better. I hope I answered the questions. I hope I didn't go off topic.
Not portraying people in this book and labels men in a particular way. You're like, if they wanted to be portrayed in a particular way, they should have done better. So I love it. Do better.
Exactly. Both parties, everyone do better. Just do better. The world is hard. So be kind. I don't know if you read my tweets. Most times I'm just exhausted with how unkind people are. People are so rude. They're so mean. I'm like, do you know how much people are dealing with in their private lives? So when they come out to the world, it's not so hard to smile. It's not so hard to be kind. And then when you're married to someone and you are mean to the person you're married to, let's just move on.
So I think that this is a good segue for us to start speaking about the anointed wife, because I think that is like the example of everybody who is problematic, right? It's like there are no perfect people, and the anointed wife is an example of that. I want us to talk a little bit about, so in this book, in that particular story, we look at the role of religion and respectability and social conditioning, right? So there is this dance that the people in the story have to do to keep up their image, right? And it's very interesting that she located this woman at that intersection. So you don't write her as a typically wounded wife. She's not the perfect victim. She's not just the woman who's being cheated on and we just completely feel sorry for her. There are many ways in which she participates in what is essentially a humiliation ritual, right? She knows that her partner is unfaithful. She knows that he also participates in very problematic ways, right? Like, when you are a man with power and you then have sex with women who are in many ways dependent on you in whatever way, right? So you are either older, you're more influential, you can change their lives. There's a very tight rope that you're walking between sex and coercion in that way, right? And his wife is fully aware of that. So she's not the perfect victim per se. She actively participates in some of that. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the role of religion and respectability and what it looks like to keep up particular images, even when you know that you're standing at a very tricky intersection.
I think people use institutions to hide, to disguise who they are. Religion, work, philanthropy. This branding thing, this whole rebranding, branding and giving yourself an image, meanwhile you are a complete asshole. I don't think it's just religion. I think religion is one of it. And it plays, and it's a very emphasized member of the under the umbrella of this whole playing to a certain crowd a certain way. The woman in the story, yes, she participates because she doesn't, not to give her an excuse, but most times women tend to want to protect what they have, no matter how bad it is. Women tend to say, oh, he's an abuser, but I'll stay. Not all women, some women stay. Domestic violence, and I think that's also one of the topics that was being discussed on Twitter like a couple of days ago. Domestic violence, and people are staying in those marriages. This man is abusing her because a partner that cheats on you is abusing you. They're mentally abusing you. They're sexually abusing you because it could bring you a sexually transmitted disease and you can't do anything about it. So with her, I don't understand women like that, which is why I wrote about her. Sometimes I write about things I don't understand. Maybe I can get some clarity. I haven't yet met anyone who is exactly like her at any of my readings. I'm sure I will eventually meet one person who would identify as someone who has protected her husband. I want to understand how their mind works. For me, when I write about something, for that story, I wrote it for my sister because my sister is a renowned feminist. She's unapologetic. She wears her feminism on her head. So when a scandal broke out in Nigeria, I remember then she was at the forefront, marching against this pastor who had done something. So I felt so moved by her passion, and I always wanted to say to her, but I didn't know how to tell her how much her passion moves me. So I wrote about it, and I told her at a reading, I said, this story is for you because normally I've never seen anybody so passionate and so unapologetic about where they stand. So I think women wear different caps, and some of them I don't quite understand how it fits on their head. So I write about it because I can't understand it. I can't understand when you say stuff that doesn't, but I can empathize with you. I can't judge you because that's also not my job. I'm not here to judge you, but I maybe write so that when I meet them, they can help me understand why you have to protect this man. And of course, men in power. Oh, we just spoke about a story now where the woman is earning more. She's the one bringing the bread to the table and she has to walk around him on eggshells because she doesn't want to cater to his ego. She doesn't want to break his ego. Men in power that do that thing where they use what they have to get what they do not deserve from women. They are foul. I stand by that. No, I don't even. I think if you have to oppress a person, no matter the gender, because you have much more bigger play or bigger, at the lack of a better word, balls at play, then you're not a good person. Because do things for people, not because they have to cater to you. So when a man in power knows that most women will be nice to him, regardless of how he looks, and he can sleep with them because they know he has something that they need, then you're not a good person because you're a married man. Why are you not putting all of that energy? You want your wife to be bad, you want your wife to be sexy, put energy in her and make her sexy. Take her to the gym if she's fatter. If you don't feel her, make her into what you want her to be. But don't prey on younger girls or older women who are disadvantaged and they need you to be able to survive. So that's where I stand.
And it's also interesting because I think what you also do in this story is speak about, in order for her to protect her husband, she needs to demonize this other woman, right? This other poor innocent woman who has had consensual sexual intercourse with this person. She's been demonized as, don't forget, men of God, they have always been doing this and they've been doing this, and this woman, she's a vice, and that and that. But it does seem that there is, in order to protect these men in these institutions, you have to demonize the other person, right? And for me, what I was thinking about when I was reading the story is like, but then do we believe women? That was something that was coming up to me, because it's only in the end, in some ways, when she said a phrase that she knows, he knows, that then she was like, oh, wait. But in truth, she, without that phrase, she wouldn't have believed that woman and should have continued to demonize her.
People don't believe women most times. Sometimes you just move on from the abuse and you move on from whatever it is, because you know nobody's going to believe you. You don't waste your time on it. The most recent case is the Cassie's case with Didi. A lot of people doubted that woman until they saw the evidence of him kicking her at the hotel lobby. Like, until you saw him literally kicking a human being, that's when a lot of men came out to say, oh, I'm sorry, my bad. Or when she said it at first, you didn't believe her. There was like a 36-pager from a lawyer about all this entire thing, and you still did not believe her. You needed to see evidence. So I think that's why most people are quiet, because where do I even begin to explain to you what had happened to me? And then when the wife now supports her husband and participates in the dehumanization of another human, another woman, what do you want me to say? There's no point. I'm just going to keep quiet, because I'm likely not going to win, except I'm from a very powerful family. And then at the end of the day, I don't know, I'm just going to be quiet. It's easier. So that's why writing is very important, because I know women who wrote to me when Nat Milam came out, sent me voice notes crying in my Instagram, like on my Instagram, voice notes crying about what had happened to them in their marriages, in their relationships, and that they felt seen by Nat Milam. I know with a couple of girls that have read it now, and they're like, they feel seen, because they used to think there was something wrong with them. I'm not saying that women are victims and all of that, but the most disadvantaged gender in the room is always a woman. Most times she doesn't know what to do to be in a better position. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about international relations, right? Because if you're on TikTok, you know that pasta and lobster. What's that? Obviously, I'm old, because now I don't even remember exactly what the little trending thing is, but it's something about like a white man buy you pasta and lobster. But in this story, I think it's interesting, right? Because we think of interracial relationships and dating in very black and white ways, right? It must just be very different. It must just be better, and dating outside of your race must be so much better, right? But in this story, no, actually, white men are still men, and there's a thing that you do to dispel the myth of difference. And I wanted to talk a little bit about why you were so intentional in doing that in this story.
So international relations, it's a very personal story to me, because I think that was the story I started with, then I stopped it, then I came back to it after I needed, and I just needed some clarity. I don't understand this whole, yes, there's an ongoing conversation that Caucasian men are easier to date for Black women because they tend to appreciate Black women more. That could be partly true. There's some evidence to it, because women are coming out and saying what their experiences are. But I do think that men generally are men at the end of the day. And when a white man steps into Nigeria, there's something that enters his blood that immediately makes him wicked. I don't know what it is. I stand by what I said, and I said it with my full chest. Something when men enter Nigeria, that just makes them wicked because they could be nice, but the moment they enter the country, I don't know what it is. So there's something in the air that just makes people's blood boil. Everybody's angry. You see a white person screaming too, and I'm like, "Oh, you're white. Why are you screaming?" So something in the air makes everyone angry. And I just wanted to state that with that story, that regardless of the race, the moment he stepped into Nigeria, he became an angry white man too. And he joined the race of angry men. And this is not racial in any way. I'm just saying something is happening in the country that is making everybody so unkind. And nobody's paying attention to it. I don't know how many books I need to write to call the attention to everyone that Nigerians, something is happening here that we are not quite. You go on Twitter, do you see how men talk about women? Almost as if they don't deserve to be alive. Do you see how women also talk about men? The pressure they put on men, the kind of money they expect a boy that is 24 to have. And then you're going to be angry with him when he decides to go and just start internet fraud because he couldn't buy you a Mercedes. Again, I'm not coming for anybody's lifestyle choices. I'm just saying there's so much pressure in the society and it's making everybody so angry. So the moment you come into Nigeria, that pain is going to just seep in, except you quickly leave. And I just wish it would go away because it's not really the best. Anyway, so yeah, I hope that answers your question.
I wanted to speak a little bit about a lover's vendetta. Obviously, all these stories are actually Oedipus Complex was one of my favorite stories in the collection because, these people, they meet on an airport. They're like, ooh, I thought, happy ending. And I said, hold my beer. I'm a Homawi. Hold up. What we spoke about earlier about like mothers and kind of people who coddle their children, but also who seem to be holders of children's dreams. Right? So the mom in this book is essentially, she's evil. I think she's evil. And it's interesting how even the son kind of plays into the mom's kind of coddling, right? Because in introducing her, he doesn't say she's a writer. He says, oh yeah, she's a geologist, right? But she writes, but she's a geologist. And so to speak about like the role of education, particularly it seems in like African communities, like who you're dating and what they do is more important than how they are, how kind, how patient, how loving, are they a good person? And I wanted to speak a little bit about that, like the idea that you bring forth in this story is essentially we're more concerned about what people have and what they bring in terms of monetary value than who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, that kills me every time. It kills me so much. Like, it just makes me laugh because people's achievements should not be what makes you love them. Some very successful people are not very kind. They're not very kind people. They're not easy to date. They're not easy to be with. So I don't know why. Let's start from your question is layered. So I'm just going to take it from each layer. I'm going to unravel it. So the layer of the woman, mother-in-laws tend to over pamper their kids. And it worries me because you're not going to marry your son. Somebody has to marry him and let the marriage survive. Let the marriage live. And the only way you will do that is if you let these two individuals find their path. Now, for the boys that are mommy's boys, I'm not against people being attached to their parents because if your parents is good to you, if their parents are good people and they're good to you, then be attached to them. But I do think that you can separate the place of your wife and the place of your mother. Then that thing of meet this person, she is a writer. Oh, and she wrote this book and that book, and everybody's like, oh, she's successful. So now we want to get to know her. No. And you're like, oh, this is this person. He was featured in Forbes 30 or that 30. Who cares? Your achievements don't make you because you're not going to, that's not what makes you a human being. That's not what people want to be friends with. I always say this, like, nobody wants to come home to achievements. That's not what makes you a human being. Achievements are not going to laugh with you. Achievements are not going to hold you when you cry. they're going to be good to look at. It's going to be like, oh yeah, oh my God, I sold out in 2 days and 1 day. But that's not going to hug you. A human being will. Like, people will hug you. Human beings will be the ones to be there for you. So why don't you learn to be kind? Why don't you learn to be good? Why don't you forget the achievements? Yes, I'm not saying don't be ambitious. I'm not saying don't do things with your life. But can we all just release our tight chests and stop expecting people to have succeeded at a certain age and have all their stuff together? Because everyone's journey is different. What's success to you might be different to me. And I'm not going to be I always tell my friends when I'm out with them, I get to a restaurant, I'm like, guys, this place looks really expensive. Can I see the menu? And I look at it, I'm like, okay, so I'm looking at the most expensive thing here is 150,000 naira. Guess what, guys? My entire budget for this night is 60,000. So let's not, I'm very quick to open up because I just don't want anybody putting pressure on me. Don't put pressure on me. Go and put pressure on yourself. Don't put pressure. So I'm like, guys, whenever we're going out, I'm not saying we can't go to bougie places, but if you're all flying first class and I can afford a business class or premium economy, that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to put, and it doesn't matter that you're telling me, oh, Damilare, a successful author. Yes, I am, but I'm still going to manage my coins. And that's not, so it's just, I do think that we should stop introducing people by who they are, what they've done. Just meet this person, meet Dami. She's really kind. She's funny. She's a clown. And I'm glad she's my friend. And I'm dating her as well. And I'm so lucky that she's going to be my wife. Whatever, or in the case of any other person. Yeah, I don't believe in all those things. I tweeted about it yesterday. Achievements don't mean anything.
So in a level of vendetta, which is actually so interesting, men and infertility is a big discussion, particularly, and I know we always want to pretend that it's just in African culture and almost to say African culture is just so backward, but infertility and fertility and progeny is a massive topic in many cultures. It's not just African culture. But I'm curious about a few things, right, in the story. So the first is that childbearing is hugely emphasized for women, right, in most cultures. And there are many names for women who cannot have children, right? So women get called barren, they get called this, they get called that. Even in our vernacular languages, there are particular names for women who cannot have children. I've yet to hear the same for men, right? So I don't know that the same exists for men. You hardly hear men being described as being barren. And I almost felt sorry for the man in the story because I wondered what it is like to be a man who cannot have children in this cis heteronormative space, right? That is so obsessed with progeny and biology and having your own children and to father your children. And once you have children, it's not only enough that you have children, you then also must have a boy, right? Because to be a father is to now have a son, And it almost seems like it's never ending. And so I'm really interested in A Lover's Vendetta because I think in some ways you humanized this man who was infertile, but who was also really cruel in his infertility because he allowed this woman to go through 4 years of struggling, of being forced to rub potions. And how interesting, right, that it's the woman who must rub potions, it's the woman who must do all of this legwork when he's the one who's in fact infertile. So I wanted to speak a little bit about that story. I'm so undecided about who the villain is here between him and his uncle. They're all villainous.
Villain in the story, except it's really obvious. But with these two, I want to say something very quickly. For Africans, I want you to understand that it's okay to use a surrogate. It's okay to adopt. The child that you have doesn't necessarily have to come from your loins, literally. Calm down, okay? You don't have to be the one who birthed the child. You can actually adopt, you can get a surrogate. Now, for those who can't afford that yet, or maybe they just don't have that kind of money, it's this pressure. I don't understand where it comes from. Now, with those men that lie, if you know you have a problem, open up to your partner and say, I can't father a child, because you would know. Over time, you have had sexual relationships with women. If none of them has carried belly in the last couple of years you've been dealing with them, and you've not been having protected sex or whatever, you should know that, okay, maybe I should check or whatever. And if you don't even check and you find out later, open up to your wife, whether it's the man or the woman. Tell your husband what he's getting into. If a person loves you, they would stay. You tell a person, listen, this is it, this is it. A lot of people are like, okay, I can't reveal my medical condition. He's going to find out eventually. So that fear that the person is going to leave you will eventually manifest. So might as well just get it over and done with. Because there are people in this world that would take some time. It might be shocking at first, but they would eventually say, okay, I can deal with this demon and I can love you through it. So what it was the marriage started on a lie. It wasn't even about the inability to father a child. It was somebody was lying and egging the other person on and gaslighting them with potions and herbs, as opposed to just being honest and saying, this is the problem, I can't deal. I think people just need to be honest with one another. There's nothing wrong with having a problem. We all can't be perfect. We have flaws, and some of our flaws are not external, they're internal, and we're not to blame for that. But let's just be honest with our partners and our friends and people that we're hoping to be in a relationship with for a lifetime, because it's the least you can do. And if they will leave, guess what? The person who will love you through that flaw will eventually find you, because there's always somebody for someone. There's always someone. Yeah, so.
I really appreciated Beard Gang, because I find that, like you, again, I think a lot of these stories are things that people have pushed under the rug, but you're saying, I'm just talking about reality. And I feel like the Beard Gang is talking about compulsory heterosexuality, right? And religion and the spaces and society in which we live in, where people know that these things are happening. They may not be talking about it, but they know they're happening. And here it's interesting because the wives have a support group, right? So they seem to be okay with the acceptance of what is happening, the reality. And in order for them to maintain a particular lifestyle, they're like, oh, we can just start a support group rather than leave these people because they be taking care of us. So I wanted to speak a little bit about this compulsory heterosexuality and the decision that these women have made in order to maintain a lifestyle.
I'm very careful about the things I say when it comes to what people choose to identify as and what people come out as, because I think that everyone's journey is precious. But I do find it very interesting that we have to hide who we are. And then not only hire someone to hide under, either as a wife or a husband, as opposed to living in whatever your truth is. And I also don't blame the people that have to hide, because the society doesn't even really accept anybody. The person that's even straight has not found acceptance. There's so much. So people are like, can I deal with these demons? Can I come out and say, this is who I am? And of course, women, like I said, women would always find a way to survive, because in us, we are very strong. So what they've done is they found the support group and they're like, okay, it still buys me this, it buys me Gucci, it buys me Prada, and I'm driving a Lamborghini, I'm living a better life than an average Nigerian woman, so I can't really complain. But are you happy though? That part, are you happy? Or are you just lying to yourself? So I'm very careful, because again, I'm not here to judge. I'm here to just hold a mirror and say, this is what's happening. Make of it what you will. But I do wish everyone would find happiness. And of course, it's easier to be happy in a Ferrari, but it's just better to be happy altogether, because that's what the point of living is. Find little small joys, and that's not going to happen if you're not living as who you ought to be. Anyway, so.
I love that. And I think also for me, what was really interesting about this story as well is like, it was the hardship of knowing that your husband is never truly yours. Mm-hmm. Like it was like a jarring truth to know that now I know this and I've made peace with it for whatever I've made peace with. but I know for a fact that my husband is not truly mine.
A lot of the women in the stories, the women were not there. Their husbands were not theirs. just so we're clear. A lot of them did not have that, but we can move on from that. Yeah.
So I actually want to chat about first time because I'm sure this is one of the Tlokonolo's favorite stories because there is so much sex in that. But the sex is interesting because not because it's just sex, but because this woman has her first orgasm at 33. She has her first orgasm at 33 and it's not with her husband. And there's a thing about like emotional intimacy that accompanies that, but also the intentionality. She has her first orgasm at 33, not with her husband, because she's been with this man who she's shown up for in ways that he would not do for her. And there's a grace that we have to apply because Ivy's unfaithful, but Idris is an asshole, right? So there's so many gray areas in this interaction. And I wanted to speak a little bit about first time, right? Because it's mind-boggling, but it's not inconceivable. The orgasm gap exists for straight women and it exists for a reason. So I wanted to speak a little bit about the first time.
I love first times. I had to rewrite that story many times. So just the fact that I went through a lot to get that story approved, he leaves a stamp in my mind. We gather a number of women in a room and ask them the first time they had their orgasm. Like, we all know that it will not be when they first had sex. It's not. And it's, that even sex should be a selfless act from both sides. You should both be seeking to please one another while you're looking for pleasure for yourself. But let's not get into all of that. So I do think that with first times, what I was doing with that story was I was trying to say that you can still get it even when you think that life is over. You can leave a situation. See, you people do not see the happy part of that too. I'm telling the woman that she can leave the man eventually after he has humiliated her so many times, or even if it's a man and it's a woman doing it, because this thing about this collection is it's not just about women, it's about men too and human beings. And that was the good part of having a male and a female editor to balance it out. So I think with First Times is such a pivotal story. I think a lot of women need to read First Times. I think they need to, because it's such a key story. I don't know it, and I wrote it for a family friend. So eventually, I think when she read it, I don't know if she ever realized that it was about her. But I just think you can leave any situation, and then you can get joy no matter how old you are. So the orgasm was symbolic of things can happen for you when you think you're past it. A lot of people be like, oh, I'm too old to wear that dress. Unless you look like a street urchin, you can wear the dress. You're not too old to fall in love. You're not too old to find joy. You're not too old to experience your first orgasm at 40. Just get it, but get it and then find yourself in the process. So First Times, I liked it. I thought First Times had a happy ending, but I don't know for you guys to see that.
You know what? I agree with you, Damilare. I will give you this one. I was really interested in, and I'm going to put them together. So Catfish and Sidelines were also some of my favorite, right? So in Sidelines, I threw the book across the room because I was so angry at this man. Because, hey, this man, let's get married. Let me buy you a house.
But also her.
I get it.
But also her.
And secrecy. Let's do not take pictures, nothing. And Damilare, I want to say that how she found out. Imagine you are lying there on the floor, and then the wife says, "My husband and I were concerned." Your husband.
Let's keep it a back. Let's go 99 plus 1. Let's keep it a back. This person keeps 5 shirts in their side of the closet. They never take pictures with you. You don't know anything about them. You have not met anybody. You're grown folk. You are grown folk. You are a whole adult plus some change. Like you're a whole adult plus some change. What do you think is happening? And this is not to excuse men's dishonesty, but it's to say, friend, there is a thing about the ways in which people, particularly women, suspend their disbelief for the delusion of the happy ending. Okay, so when you are with someone and they don't want to be posted on your WhatsApp, what witchcraft do you think is happening? What is the negotiation with yourself? Because I think we need to also have honest conversations about that. There are delusions that people are very happy to keep going because there's also this idea of like happiness that you want to sell yourself. And the truth isn't now suddenly revealed at the end. You've always known. That's why even the demands that you make of this person, you're very measured in how you demand things. Because she could just have said, why do you only have 5 shirts? Bring the rest of your clothes. Why have I never met your family? Why? Why was the why only coming after you fainted in the restaurant? Where was why? Where?
Sometimes you need to be Delulu.
Just so we're clear, we do know that Delulu is the only Solulu. So girls stay delusional. Okay, now on a serious note, I feel bad for her because, of course, you're right. The signs were there. It was obvious that this man, there was something off with him, and she chose to stay. Again, I can't judge. I can only write. I feel bad for her. I really did. Like when I was writing, I was like, oh, poor girl. But the truth of the matter is she knew what she was getting into. She can't tell me she didn't know. She just said, like, Alma just said it doesn't, it's ridiculous to say that you didn't know. And we catfish.
When you want to be a baddie, but you don't have the experience. When you want to be a baddie, but you don't have the experience. And now people come to hit the fan, and you are like, oh, I don't know how to do anything.
You want to judge the baddie lights, but not the person who was aside and not to pretend they didn't know they were aside.
Just Delulu. Just Delulu. I just want to say, I loved the roommate. The roommate was like, you know what? I know how to put it down, so let me show this man how I'm going to put it down. No, I don't condone
so let me say something. That roommate, if we're going to keep it 100, she's a witch. Let's not lie.
No, she is. Straight out.
If we're going to keep it 100, let's not be lying to ourselves. Since we want to be honest here, she's a witch. Because why are you preparing a man for yourself through your friend? But then, again, it's not my place to judge, but I've said what I have to say. If I was a reader alone and I didn't write it, it's giving witchcraft on a very,
Damilare, let me tell you, since you won't judge them, we will judge them on your behalf. We are judging her. That is premium witch behavior.
Oh my God.
That is a witch that went to the private school of witchery. It is witch behavior.
I'm afraid though. Anyway, but yeah, so I had so much fun writing Catfish. I was laughing as I was writing it. I sent it to my editor. I was like, this story is I laughed. I wrote Catfish in a day. I was just laughing as I was writing. I just couldn't stop, because I was like, this is incredible. So yeah, it was giving witchcraft. It still is giving witchcraft. If anybody is doing it right now, it's giving be bold and tell a man, if you cannot bend, just say it that you can't. Don't be lying. Just own who you are. Someone is going to love you for who you are. You don't need to pretend. Who's going to love you is going to love you. So that witches don't come up and do stuff. But yeah, I don't judge because I wrote the story.
That witch.
That is premium witchery. I want to chat a little bit about I Knew You, because I Knew You frustrated me so much. Right? And I think what frustrated me a lot was about how men will have particular unresolved issues that they're very aware of. And, okay, yeah. So there's a way in which people, particularly men, use the self-awareness as an excuse to not do better. So it's like, I know this problematic thing about myself, and because I know it and I own it, I therefore don't have to do better. And there is there is an understanding for their issues that is so deep and that is so wide that it's absolutely astounding when you're the person on the receiving end. And in this book, there is a trauma of abandonment, and there's a recurrence of the cycle. It's like this person is self-aware to the point at which it's self-serving for them, but not at which it requires them to do better. And I found this to be the most frustrating story in the book, because there's also just like an entitlement to an understanding. So we must understand that you were traumatized by the girl who broke your heart at 19, and you now have the right to be horrible to every woman that you ever date following that. And I wanted to talk about that as like the most frustrating story in the book, but also very realistic, right? This is absolutely how so many people behave.
I knew you. Again, I wrote it for someone. I wrote it for a friend of mine. She's a much older person, but I have a lot of love for her. And I wanted to just write something for her to know I felt sorry for the thing that happened to her. But the thing about trauma is anybody can have trauma. How we choose to respond to our trauma is very important. And whether we want to offload that trauma on another person is also key. With I Knew You, oh God, I had a whole argument with my editor about this thing. We argued for 3 hours because I wanted to write the story the way I wanted to write it. He kept saying, no, it doesn't work. And then it came out, and then it was such a huge hit amongst men and women as well, because people have what they're dealing with. Before you get into a relationship, before you get into a marriage, before you get into any friendship, please deal with your trauma. Or at least don't come with that bad behavior. Don't come with the whole, this is who I am, I already let you know. Do better, okay? Don't tell me this is who you are and I should accept you, but then you also want to be loved. That's very confusing. If you want to be who you are, then stay out of friendships, relationships, marriages, and just be who you are in your house. That's the problem. I'm always very confused. You can cheat. You can have as many sexual partners as you want. If you're single, it's not going to be called cheating. It's just going to be a single man meeting many women, or a single woman meeting many men. But when you are in a relationship where it's not a consensual, open relationship, and you're cheating on a partner, that's why it's funny to me, because you had the choice of being single. Why are you now looking for love and also trying to be sleeping with different things? So I'm very confused about people and coming up with, this is my trauma, accept it. No, do better. I'm very sorry. The whole point of writing is to say, please do better. There's no excuse for this. Treat your trauma or stay by yourself until you are treated. Don't bring your trauma to another happy person, a good person who deserves love, and then you're stressing the person out. That one I would say categorically, I don't support. So yeah.
And that's on her. That is on her. I know we spoke about Independent Day a little bit earlier, but I was really interested in the role of trigger warnings, right? Particularly when we speak about, really hectic stuff like violence, and particularly sexual violence. And I wanted to know what your feelings were, right? Because you enter the story with no warning. And then in the first line, you're like, oh, whoops, this is what we're going to. And I wanted to know your feelings about trigger warnings. But I also think that this story is such a powerful way to end your collection, right? Because it's a commentary on the Charleses of the day, right? It's a commentary on, at some point, baby, we're coming for you. It may not be today, but we're coming for you.
Yes. So my American editor, actually, I think they put it in there that there's some trigger warning, but we didn't do that in Nigeria, sadly. And I don't even think we did that with Mom as well, because Mom has some heavy stuff. But here is the thing. I long for a day. I want to be able to shoot a film where in almost all the scenes, the women will meet men and be like, and someone is introducing and saying, oh, hi, meet Mosu. And she's like, oh, I know him. He raped me when I was 7. And just let's make people very uncomfortable with the bad behavior that they portrayed. Let's get to a place where it's almost like, oh, I'm like, oh, hey, meet meet Shola, and Shola says, "Oh, I know her. She cheated on me with 2 guys while we're dating." There we are. Let's all meet each other with the madness that we carry. Because it's like, might as well. So I long for that day when that now you have to check what you do to people because you don't know who you will meet and you don't know how you will be introduced. But because everybody covers people's bad behavior, it's almost like they can get away with whatever. So that's what I try to do with Independent Day, is to say that you got abused is not your fault. It's the person who abused you that should be ashamed. So yeah, that's just like a dream of mine eventually.
I'm sorry, I love that. I love the idea of being like, oh, meet Lerato. Oh, Lerato's the one who bullied me in high school. Yes,
exactly.
Hi, Lerato.
Yeah. Oh, and you're like, oh, meet this person. Like, oh, I used to work with her 3 years ago. She didn't pay me well and she was a horrible boss. I've met her before. That's it. Let's all just be calling out people for their bad behavior. There you go.
This has been such an insightful conversation. Thank you so much, Damilare. We really enjoyed it, and we really enjoyed nearly all the men in Lagos are mad. Congratulations on your latest novel, which is out. It's called Only Big People Matters Tomorrow. And we are excited to see you in South Africa. We absolutely cannot wait. But it's to really, from the Cheeky Nation, say thank you for this book. And we're also excited to see what Only Big People Matters Tomorrow will do. But also to say thank you for writing such a humorous, but such an insightful, and such a powerful collection of short stories that centers women and their experiences, but importantly also calls out the madmen, not only in Lagos, but in Joburg, New York, and everywhere else where we encounter some of the madness, the big madness that we see in this book. So congratulations and thank you, Damilare.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun on this. This was cool. I can't wait to hear it when it's out. Thank you.
Thank you again, Damilare. Again, for me, it's exciting to think about there's madness in dating, right? But there is madness in dating, and I feel like nearly all the men in Lagos are mad. It's just like, woo, you know this. Like you read it knowing. Some of the stories you're like, I know that girl. I know that girl. So thank you very much for the truth, but also in the way that you delivered it. It felt disarming in a way. So you entered the story and you wanted to know why this wife wanted to cut her husband's penis, and now you're in it already. So thank you very much. And we cannot wait to talk about your novel. We know that we'll definitely have you back at the Cheeky Natives to be like, okay, let's talk about it. So thank you so much. And Cheeky Natives, please get yourself a copy of Nearly All the Men in Lagos Are Mad. Trust me, you want this. You want this collection in your library.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Cheeky Natives. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and rate the podcast on all your streaming platforms.